Is there a climate change? I'm sorry for asking this provocative question. But actually, if you look into the recent politics and some governmental decisions, so we might assume it's not happening. But the truth is, while some people in areas which are more developed in the world or which are benefiting from higher biodiversity and so on, they are not so much affected immediately by the climate change. But in other areas, people suffer, and they suffer even way more and faster than we do see. I am a bit privileged living in Sweden, but I have to admit even here now, in the recent winter, we have seen big effects of the climate change. Slowly getting warmer. The past Luleå advertised themselves as life below 0 degrees, but nowadays the average temperature goes higher. It's rising up. And that is one of the issues, right? This inequality we have actually. Sometimes you don't observe climate change, so you think it's not happening. And then thinking of climate justice and of the way how can we solve climate change and related issues with AI methods. That's something which is not really well discussed, and there are high differences into what to invest into between the rich countries and the poor countries. Another ethical issue is also the responsibility and accountability. Like, if you do something somewhere, it might have an effect to some other direction, another area in the world. So should we be held, specifically when it's across nations? It's very hard to hold someone accountable. It's also about risk distribution and prioritization. In some areas, you have more earthquakes. In coastal areas, you might have more often the threat of the rising water. In other areas, like here in Sweden, there's still a land rise happening, so we're not so much affected by that, and there are less earthquakes as well. But melting snow and having less and less snow is also a risk which we have to deal with in a different way. What to prioritize? Next one is the displacement and human rights. So if there is really something happening in an area and we cannot deal with it anymore because climate change is happening, how do we, in a right way, work with the people? Maybe also having the right of climate refugees. It's very difficult. There's also the intergenerational justice. Of course, now we can continue still. The Earth seems to be still livable, so we can continue investing just more in data centers and AI compute and whatever, more flights and transport around the world. But that will have an even faster acceleration of more threatening situations in climate. So is it okay? Do we have the right to delay action? Next question is the risk of technological solutions. AI has, and I showed that earlier, it has the possibility to positively impact climate change, but it also has a possible negative impact. Who decides which methods to use, and maybe do we fully understand the possible negative impact already? Further issue is this power over data and decision making. If data is held privately, either in companies or in just a few countries, it will make it hard to take maybe global decisions. So having also transparency is useful. And finally, this issue, you have local decisions, but you might also have scientific solutions, and they might be different. Which decision to take, how to affect and change policies. These are all very important ethical issues. And there's also this emergency of something happening just now versus long time thinking. And if there is a disaster when having a disaster response, we have to take into account how will that impact the future as well. Or even longer term thinking, could we have prevented it, or will we prevent it in the future? And as I mentioned already, the satellite imagery and analyzing those, they are a really big help into seeing and preventing disasters. But did you know that already in February 22, for example, a coronal mass ejection, that's one of these solar flares, had led to 38 commercial satellites from Starlink being just lost. And the more satellites we put up into space, the more higher the risk of a coronal mass ejection, just destroying this technology. And what's happening then, it's not that they just disappear, it's a lot of space debris. So all of these activities we're doing lead to kind of polluting with space waste, our outer space or closer space outside of the atmosphere. And that in return leads to even more higher risks to satellites. So we have to really carefully think for all the actions, how sustainable in the long term they are. And AI methods are really useful to support us making the right decisions.